I was the only one who stayed to care for my sick dad. Then he left everything to my estranged brother. I spent 5 years in that house, trapped within its walls like a prisoner with no sentence, no release date, just an endless stretch of days bleeding into nights, waiting for the inevitable. It started with small things. My father forgetting where he put his keys, losing track of conversations, calling me by my mother's name instead of my own. At first, we laughed it off. Old age, we told ourselves. Just another cruel trick time plays on the mind. But deep down, I knew. I knew the moment I saw the confusion in his eyes, the frustration in his trembling hands, the way he clung to familiarity like a lifeline that was slipping from his grasp. The doctors confirmed it soon after, a diagnosis spoken in clinical terms, words stripped of warmth or comfort. Progressive cognitive decline, no cure, no way to stop it. Only a slow, merciless descent into oblivion. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who chose to stay. My brother, Daniel, had already disappeared long before that. He left home at 20, cutting ties with the family as if we were nothing more than an inconvenience. He never called, never visited, not when Mom got sick, not when she passed, not when Dad started slipping away piece by piece until the man who had raised us was just a hollow echo of himself. Daniel was free. And me? I put everything on hold, my career, my social life, any chance of building something of my own. Because someone had to do it. Someone had to be there to handle the medications, to pay the mounting hospital bills, to sit beside him when the nights got too long, to remind him over and over again that he wasn't alone. I bathed him, fed him, cleaned up after him when he lost control of his body. I watched as the man who once stood tall, who once carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, became frail, dependent, trapped in the prison of his own failing mind. And through it all I held on to one belief, that he knew. Even if he couldn't always say it, even if the disease took away his ability to express it, I believed, I needed to believe, that he understood what I had sacrificed for him, that when the time came, he would remember who was there. But I was wrong, because when the will was read, my world shattered. And for the first time in 5 years, I finally realized that love and loyalty meant nothing. The lawyer's office was suffocating, the air thick with the scent of old paper and expensive cologne. The walls were lined with shelves of legal books, and in the center of the room sat a polished oak desk where Mr. Holloway, my father's attorney, methodically flipped through a thick stack of documents. I sat in one of the stiff leather chairs, hands clenched together in my lap. Daniel sat beside me. He hadn't changed much in the years we had been apart. Still impeccably dressed, still carrying himself with the same effortless arrogance that had defined him since we were kids. His suit was designer, his watch gleaming under the overhead lights. He looked like a man who had never known struggle, never tasted the bitterness of sacrifice. And judging by the slight smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, he already knew what was coming. As per Richard Caldwell's final wishes, the lawyer began, clearing his throat, the entirety of his estate, including his home, financial assets, and remaining investments, shall be passed on to his eldest son, Daniel Caldwell. Silence. A suffocating, deafening silence. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "Excuse me," I said, my voice eerily calm. Mr. Holloway barely spared me a glance. "Everything has been left to Daniel." "That doesn't make any sense," I said, my pulse pounding in my ears. "I was the one who took care of him. I was the one who—" I cut myself off, my hands tightening into fists. "He never even saw Daniel in the last 5 years. Why would he—" "Because I'm the oldest," Daniel said smoothly, finally speaking. I turned to him, my breath unsteady. "You don't deserve it," I hissed. He smirked. "But I got it anyway, didn't I?" A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me, but there was no humor in it. "You didn't even care about him," I spat. "You didn't call, you didn't visit, you didn't do anything. And yet, he still gave you everything?" Daniel shrugged, feigning innocence. "Guess that's just how it works, huh?" I wanted to lunge across the desk and wipe that smug look off his face. But I didn't. I forced myself to stay still, to breathe, to think. Because something wasn't right. My father might have been distant, cold even. But he wasn't cruel. He wasn't the kind of man who would knowingly betray the person who had dedicated half a decade to keeping him alive. Unless he hadn't written the will at all. I spent the next 2 weeks drowning in anger. At my father, at Daniel, at myself, for believing that any of it had mattered. I should have known better. I should have seen it coming. But then, something happened. I received a call from Emily Green, my father's former nurse. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice hushed. "Meet me at Cafe Luna, tonight." I went, and what she told me changed everything. "Your father never planned to leave everything to Daniel," she said, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. "I was there when he updated his will 6 months ago. He told me himself he wanted you to have it. The house, the assets, everything." I felt my breath hitch. "Then why?" Emily hesitated. 2 weeks before he passed, Daniel showed up. My entire body went cold. "What?" "He came to the house," she said. "Had a private meeting with your father. I don't know what was said, but after that, your father wasn't the same. He seemed anxious, conflicted. A few days later, I overheard him talking to his lawyer about making things right, but he never got the chance." My heart pounded. Daniel had changed the will. He had somehow manipulated my father into altering his final wishes, whether through lies, coercion, or something worse. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I stormed into my brother's penthouse without warning, my blood boiling. He barely had time to react before I threw the legal documents onto his pristine glass coffee table. "I know what you did," I snarled. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You're going to have to be more specific." I leaned forward, my voice dropping into a deadly whisper. "You lied. You manipulated him. You stole everything that wasn't yours to take." His smirk didn't waver. "And?" he said lazily. I exhaled sharply, my hands curling into fists. "You're going to fix it," I said. "Or I swear to God, I'll bury you under the weight of your own lies." His smirk faltered, because he knew me well enough to know that I meant it. And this time, I wasn't backing down. Daniel sat across from me, sprawled lazily on his expensive leather couch, his smirk lingering but his eyes calculating. He had always been like this, untouchable, confident, effortlessly dismissive. But I saw it now, the way his fingers tapped against the armrest, the slight shift in his posture. He knew he had been caught, and he knew I wasn't going to let it go. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said smoothly, feigning innocence. "Dad made his decision. You just can't handle it." I clenched my jaw, exhaling slowly through my nose. I had expected him to deny it, to pretend that he was still in control. Daniel never admitted to anything unless he was forced to. But I had spent years cleaning up after our father, making sure his bills were paid, his affairs were in order. I had seen his real will before Daniel slithered his way back into his life. And now, I was going to prove it. "Emily told me everything," I said, my voice steady. "Dad updated his will 6 months before he died, and he didn't leave anything to you." That got his attention. His smirk faltered for a fraction of a second before he masked it with an eye roll. "Oh, please," he scoffed, leaning back. "You're seriously going to take the word of some nurse? People say all kinds of things when they don't get what they want." "I don't need just her word," I said coolly, sliding a folded piece of paper onto the coffee table between us. He frowned, picking it up. His eyes scanned the page. His jaw clenched. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice quieter now. I leaned forward, my lips curling into a slow, humorless smile. "You think Dad didn't keep records?" I murmured. "He might have been sick, but he wasn't stupid. He made copies of everything. And lucky for me, he trusted me to handle his paperwork." Daniel stared at the page, an unsigned copy of our father's real will, the one that named me as the sole heir. "This doesn't prove anything," he muttered, tossing the paper aside. "Maybe not," I conceded. "But it does prove that Dad changed his mind. And when this goes to court, that's going to raise some serious questions." Silence. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Daniel was weighing his options, calculating whether it was worth the risk to keep lying. And then, just like that, the mask cracked. He sighed, rubbing his face with one hand before letting out a sharp, humorless laugh. "All right, fine," he admitted, shaking his head. Yeah, I had the will changed. So what? I inhaled sharply, rage simmering beneath my skin. So what? I repeated, my voice deadly quiet. Dad was a mess, Daniel continued, completely unfazed by my anger. His mind was going. He was confused. Do you really think he was in the right state to make those kinds of decisions? Oh, but he was in the right state when he conveniently left everything to you, I snapped. Daniel waved a hand dismissively. It doesn't matter. It's legal now. You can fight it all you want, but do you really think you'll win? I studied him, my pulse pounding in my ears, and then I smiled. Yes, I said simply. His smirk wavered. You think you're going to take me to court over this? He scoffed. Good luck. That's going to be expensive. I don't need to take you to court, I replied smoothly. I just need to make sure everyone knows what you did. That got him. Because Daniel didn't just care about money. He cared about his reputation. The next morning, I made my move. I called in every favor I had, contacted every journalist willing to listen. I leaked the documents, emails, medical reports, the unsigned will, everything that painted a very clear picture. Daniel Caldwell had manipulated our sick father into changing his will. And it worked. The story spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with outrage. Greedy son steals inheritance from dying father. Loyal child left with nothing after years of sacrifice. The comments were ruthless, people picking apart Daniel's history, exposing his absence during our father's final years. And then came the backlash. Investors started pulling out of his business. Partnerships collapsed. Clients walked away. Daniel had built his life on connections, on people trusting him, believing in him. And now, he was radioactive. I hadn't even stepped into a courtroom yet, and I had already won. It took 3 days for Daniel to finally crack. He showed up at my apartment, looking nothing like the arrogant man who had smirked at me in his penthouse just days ago. His clothes were wrinkled, his usual effortless confidence replaced with something closer to desperation. You happy now? He spat the moment I opened the door. I crossed my arms, leaning against the door frame. Not yet. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Look, let's figure this out. We can come to some kind of agreement. I raised an eyebrow. Now you want to negotiate? He gritted his teeth. What do you want, Ethan? I stared at him, my mind whirling with possibilities. I could take everything, drag him through a legal battle, take back what was rightfully mine, leave him with nothing. But then, an idea took root, a far better punishment. I'll drop the case, I said slowly. His eyes narrowed in suspicion. And you give up the house. His entire body tensed. What? The house, I repeated, my voice steady. Sign it over to me, publicly. No lawsuits, no fights. You walk away clean, and I get the one thing that actually matters. He opened his mouth, probably to argue, but then he hesitated, because he knew. If he fought, he'd lose everything. But if he walked away now, at least he'd still have his money, his business, whatever was left of his reputation. It was the only way out, and he hated it. Fine, he said finally. The word spat like poison. I smiled. Good choice. 2 weeks later, the house was mine. I stood in the grand foyer, my footsteps echoing off the marble floors, my fingers trailing along the polished wooden banister of the staircase. For the first time in years, I wasn't a caretaker. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't the forgotten child. I was the one who had won. Daniel was gone. My father's final betrayal had been undone. The house was finally mine. Not through inheritance, not through some sentimental gift of my father's dying wish, but because I fought for it. Because I forced Daniel's hand and made him surrender the one thing that mattered most. The proof that I had been the only one who stayed, the only one who deserved it. But as I stood in the grand foyer, staring at the walls that had once echoed with my father's failing voice, the weight of it all pressed down on me. I had won. And yet it didn't feel like victory. It felt like ashes. The house had always been a place of contradictions. It was beautiful, a sprawling estate that boasted wealth and power, with its marble floors and high ceilings, its crystal chandeliers and manicured gardens. But beneath all that grandeur, it had been a prison. A place where I spent 5 years trapped in a cycle of caregiving, exhaustion, and quiet, unacknowledged sacrifice. Now that I finally stood here, free to claim it as my own, I realized something. I didn't want it. Not really. I had fought for it because it had been stolen from me, because I refused to let Daniel, who had been absent, indifferent, selfish, walk away with something he didn't earn. But standing in the empty space with the silence pressing against my ears, I understood the truth. This house wasn't my home. It had never been. It was a reminder of my father's betrayal, of my brother's greed, of the years I had lost waiting for someone to acknowledge what I had done. And now, it was mine to destroy. I was packing up what little I wanted to keep when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but then I saw the name. Daniel. For a moment, I debated letting it ring. He had nothing left to bargain with, no more tricks up his sleeve. I had already taken everything he had stolen, but some part of me, perhaps the part that still wanted to understand, answered. "What do you want?" I asked, voice flat. There was a pause. When he spoke, he sounded tired, not angry, not smug, just defeated. "I need to know," he said. "Why didn't you take everything?" I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers to my temple. "Because I didn't need to." "Bullshit," he muttered. "You could have wiped me out. You could have taken the money, the investments, everything. But you didn't. You only wanted the house." I sat down on the edge of the grand staircase, staring at the intricate carvings in the wooden railing. "Because that's all I wanted to prove," I said simply. "That this place was mine. That I was the one who deserved it, not you." Silence stretched between us. "You still hate me, don't you?" he asked. "No," I admitted. "I don't." He let out a hollow laugh. "Then what do you feel?" I thought about that. "Nothing," I said finally, because it was the truth. For years I had burned with anger, with resentment, with the unbearable weight of injustice. But now that I had won, that fire had gone cold. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I just didn't care. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "Now?" I repeated, glancing around the house one last time, and then, finally, I made my decision. Now, I let it go. Selling the house was easier than I expected. A property like this, tied to the Caldwell name, didn't stay on the market long. Within a month it was gone, the money transferred into my account, the keys handed over to a new owner who saw it as a dream rather than a graveyard. I didn't even bother to say goodbye to it. Instead, I packed up the few things I had left in life, what little I hadn't sacrificed for my father's care, and I left town. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but for the first time in years, I wasn't trapped anymore. I was free, and that was worth more than any inheritance,